This is the video key for 10-2 more complicated ax plus b equals cx plus d. I do 2, you do 2, so this is a really great way to complete this worksheet. First, I think it's really important to review the different ways to represent a coefficient. When you see this variable term, it still has a coefficient of 1. Any of those would still be true here for h. For the opposite of w, sometimes we read that as negative w. It is a negative 1 times it. It is the same as negative 1 times w. This is along the same idea. You can break this out into 3/5 times t wholes. So really what we have here is a coefficient of 3/5. Go back and look at the original. 3t divided by 5 is the same as 3/5 t. So as long as that t is up there in the numerator, you're going to pull that coefficient out, and this is how we're going to be working with it in equation solving. So they may kind of show you this, 5y divided by negative 8. Remember, you can move this to being negative 5/8 times y, which is really just negative 5/8 y. So you've got a negative 5/8 as your coefficient. That's really important as we go into equation solving, when you know how to multiply by the reciprocal of the coefficient in order to isolate that variable. So let's look at these four. I'm going to do A and B. I'm going to encourage you to pause it when I complete A and B and do B and C and D on your own. And then at the end, we'll have the answers. X divided by 3 equals x plus 4. Well, the first thing I notice here is x on both sides. So the first thing I want to do is I want to combine like terms. I am going to rewrite this as 1/3 x equals 1x plus 4, so I can really visualize that. I'm not going to be working with the constant. I'm going to be subtracting 1x from both sides, eliminating that term, leaving me 4 on the right. 1/3 minus 1 is negative 2/3 x. So now it's ax equals b. I'm going to multiply by the reciprocal of the coefficient. The reciprocal here isn't just 3/2. It's negative 3/2, because any number times its reciprocal should equal positive 1, giving me that positive 1 coefficient that I'm looking for. And to balance the equation, you need to do that to both sides of the equation. Negative 12/2 conveniently gives us negative 6. I can go back in there and do my check step. Negative 6 divided by 3 equals negative 6 plus 4. This is negative 2 equals negative 2. It does check out. B. All right, so 1m minus 3 equals 4/5 m minus 2. Okay, well, I've got constants on both sides. I've got variables on both sides. You can start with whatever term you want to. I tend to really look at these coefficients here. I like positive coefficients personally. So I'm going to subtract 4/5 m and subtract 4/5 m. That eliminates that term there, leaving me with 1 minus 4/5, which is 1/5 m. Now at the same step, I know I've basically moved this term over to here. I need to take this 3 and I want to move it over here with this other constant. So I'm going to add 3 to both sides in the same step. You can do it in 2 steps, but I'm going to do it in 1. That goes to 0, leaving me with 1/5 m. And this is 0 minus 2, so that's a negative 2 plus 3, leaving me positive 1. I'm going to multiply by the reciprocal of the coefficient and get m equals 5. Let's go ahead and check that. 5 minus 3 equals 4 times 5 divided by 5 minus 2. 2 equals 4 times 5 is 20 divided by 5 minus 2. 2 equals 4 minus 2. 2 equals 2. It does check out. I want you to pause now and complete C and D, which are very similar. Think through it. Pause now. All right, let's take a look at these. I'm going to tell you that the answer to C is x equals 10. And the answer to D is w equals 3. If you did not get this, I want you to go back. I want you to review how I solved this And I want you to try to employ that same kind of strategy here for C and D. All right, number YTI2, we're going to solve by identifying the least common denominator. So we saw this before. Let's pretend we don't want to work with fractions. I don't want to work with fractions. Fractions are very difficult for me. When I look at this, I see a denominator of 4 and a denominator of 8. If I take the least common denominator and multiply the entire equation by 8, I know that I'm going to end up with 24y divided by 4. You get an 8, and you get an 8, minus 48. Now, this is the term you can't forget about. You get an 8 equals 8y divided by 8 plus, and you get an 8, 32. Well, remember, this is just the coefficient of 24 fourths. 24 fourths is 6y minus 48 equals 8 divided by 8 is 1y plus 32. And you should be able to solve that equation from there. We'll have the answer key here at the end. Part B. All right, I'm looking at the denominators. I see 6 and I see 3. I could pick the least common denominator, which would be 6. Let's pretend I don't see that. Let's say I see 12. It's not wrong to pick 12. I'm just going to get some bigger numbers to work with. It's still going to be an equal equation, and I'm still going to get the same answer, even if I multiply through by 6. You get a 12. I love finding p in math class. You get a 12. 12p divided by 6. You get a 12. 12p divided by 3. And you get a 12, 24. This is the term that people tend to forget to apply that 12 to. You have to apply it to every single term in the equation. This is going to simplify to 12p minus 2p equals 4p plus 24. And you should be able to solve it from there by combining like terms and then getting all of your variable terms on one side of the equal sign. I will put up the answer to that at the end. I'd like you to pause now and attempt C and D. Hopefully you came up with the answer of x equals 3 and w equals -1. All right, I'm going on to YTI3. Now this worksheet is a little bit confusing when you first read it. I actually made a mistake the first time I saw it. The directions, notice that this A and this A are the same problem. So really what they're doing is kind of stepping your thinking process through here. Don't solve it twice. For each equation, decide the number of decimal places each constant and coefficient should have. I think what they're really looking for here is to say, well, here's the decimals I'm working with. It looks like there's only one place to the right of the decimal, so the answer there is one place right. So they want me to then prepare the equation by saying, all right, if I need one place to the right, I'm going to annex a 0. That doesn't really have any meaning there. So that everything in this equation has something in the 10th place value. That's not necessarily something that I typically write. Typically, I'm going to do this step mentally, and I'll show you what that will look like below. So that's step 1. That's step 2, and decide what number to multiply. Well, if I have one number to the right of the decimal point, in order to eliminate the tenths there, I'm going to multiply by 10. That's all you have to do up at the top. It's really taking you through the thinking process to solve this equation. I wouldn't really write any of that. I'd look at it, I'd say, 10's place value. I'd put my parentheses in, and I'd multiply this entire equation by 10. That's exactly how I would show it. You get a 10, and you get a 10, and you get a 10, and you get a 10, making this 20w minus 4 equals 10 plus 18w. Now, when you go back up to that thinking process, I do like the idea of annexing that 0 to help me remember to make this into 10. When I originally made my answer key, I forgot to multiply these two numbers by 10, and I got the wrong answer. So it does affect it. You have to get every single term multiplied by 10. It looks like I like to deal with my variable terms first, and I like a good positive coefficient. That's just my personal preference, 2w. And to eliminate this 4, I'm going to add 4 to both sides, equals 14, dividing by the coefficient of 2, w equals 7. If I was going to check it, I want to go back into my original. 2 times 7 minus 4/10 equals 1 plus 1 and 8/10 times 7. And I am going to use a calculator there. 2 times 7 is 14 minus 4/10, which is going to be 13 6/10. 1 plus 1 and 8/10 times 7 is 12 6/10. That gives me 13 6/10. It does check out. Let's look at B. So back up here is that preparation. This is what's going on mentally for me. Okay, so it looks like I've got 2, and they already all have it, which is really convenient for me. So it's going to be 2 places to the right. And I don't have any preparation to do. You're going to have preparation to do here, and you're going to see that on the answer key. So really all it would ask me to do here in this case, since they all already have 2 places to the right of the decimal, I'm just going to recopy it. I don't typically write this. It's not wrong not to write it. You don't have to include it. You can include it if you want. And what am I going to multiply by? Well, if I've got 2 to the right every single time, I'll multiply by 100. Not because it's my favorite number, because it's going to move that decimal point over and allow me to work with integers. So if I come down here to the actual problem, I'm just going to show my multiplication by 10 and get 17k minus 43 plus 20 times 100, simple. 17 minus 43 plus 25 plus 5. I dropped something. I got all mixed up. Let's start that over. 17k minus 43 equals 25k plus 5. A little distracted when I didn't write down 100 there. Now, I think I want to subtract 17 because I like to have a positive coefficient. That is my personal preference. 25 minus 17. Yes, I'm totally typing this into my calculator because I haven't had another cup of coffee yet. 8k, and that means I want to subtract 5 and subtract 5. This is a negative. And if I add the opposite here, I should get negative 48 equals 8k, dividing by 8, and dividing by 8, negative 6 equals k. Do I really want to check that? Not exactly. 1700ths times 6 minus 4300ths should equal 2500ths times negative 6 plus 500ths. This should be good. 1700ths times negative 6. Oops. Negative 1 200ths minus 4300ths. $2,500 times negative 6. $1,450 checks in. I want you to pause the video right now. I want you to attempt C and D. Go ahead and pause it right now. I hope you found the answer here is V equals 8 and X equals 7. Okay, continuing on. Last one. I like this up here. It's a summary of the steps. Eliminate any parentheses by distributing. And remember, you may need to add the opposite, especially if you're distributing a negative term. Then you want to clear any fractions or decimals by multiplying each side by the least common denominator or by a power of 10. And And then you want to combine each like terms. What this is pointing out is I can, but that's not how we teach you to do it. If you have parentheses in here, you don't want to multiply through here by 6, not yet. So the first thing I want to do is I want to distribute. 1/2 times 2 is going to be 1. So in the end, I'll have 2/2 h minus 1/2 equals, and I'm distributing that 1/3. 2/3 h plus 1/6. Now this is going to be just a 1, so h minus 1/2 equals 2/3 h plus 1/6. Now I'm going to try to eliminate, so the first thing it said was eliminate parentheses. Now it says clear any fractions or decimals. I've got fractions, this is repeating fractions, so I'm not changing it to a decimal. Least common denominator is going to be 6, so I'm going to multiply this whole thing by 6. You get a 6. You get a 6. You get a 6. You get a 6. So, of course, that's, minus 3 equals 4h plus 1. Now I can solve this equation. I will typically, again, always try to have a positive coefficient. That is just my personal preference. It's not exactly a mathematical thing. It gives me 2h, and then I want to get rid of this by adding 3 to both sides. That goes away, equals 4, dividing by 2, h equals 2. Checking it, 1/2 times, I'm going to just mentally do this. 2 times 2 is 4 minus 1 equals 1/3 times the quantity, 4 plus 1/2. So, 1/2 of 3 should equal 1/3 of 4.5. So 1/2 of 3 is 1.5. And 4 5/10 divided by 3 is 1 5/10. And it checks out. So h is 2. Over here, again, I do not want to multiply this entire equation by 10. Oh, actually by 100, not yet. What I want to do first is I want to distribute. You can, but there's some tricks in there that we really haven't talked about that impacts if you're going to do that. So really what we want you to do first is we want you to eliminate all parentheses first. 5/10 p plus 1 5/10, 1/2 of 3 equals 3/10 plus, I'm going to use my calculator for that because, again, needing coffee, 1600s, 4800s, p. Now I'm ready to multiply through in order to get rid of my decimal. And I thought it was going to be 10, but looking at this one, it's going to be times 100. So this is going to swoop twice, which is going to give me the number 50. Plus, this is going to swoop twice, which is going to give me 150 equals, swooping twice, plus 48p. Love finding p in math class. Let's have fun. Let's have a negative coefficient here. Why not? Subtracting 50, which is going to give me negative 2p over here, which means I'm going to subtract 30 and subtract 30, giving me 120 equals negative 2p, dividing by negative 2, negative 60 equals p. Let's see if I get it right. Check step, I'm going to bring it up here and do the check step. So it's 5/10 times negative 60 plus 3 equals 3 times the quantity 1/10 plus 1600ths times negative 60. 5/10 times negative 57 equals 3 times 1/10 plus 1600ths times negative 60, negative 9 6/10. So negative 9 6/10 plus 1/10 is going to be 3 times negative 9 5/10 times 3, negative 28.5. So then I have to do this, which is half of negative 57, negative 28.5. It checks out. That is correct. At this point, I'd like you to pause. I'd like you to attempt C and D. Remember, you're going to want to distribute first. Go ahead and pause. I hope you're finding that the answer to C is y equals -3, and D is n equals 1. Hope you enjoy. Good luck. See you on the flip side.